Good evening. This is Brian with IndianPeaksWeather.net up here in Nederland, Colorado at 8,200 feet. It's Friday night. We're going into our weekend here in the Central Rocky Mountains, and it's looking like another winner of a weekend. We've been lucky so far. We've had several really nice weekends in a row this fall, and this will be no exception with plenty of warm temperatures and sunny skies and no precipitation expected. There's a possibility of a big change in the forecast early next week across much of Colorado, including the foothills here in Nederland and also the northeastern plains, Denver, Greeley, Fort Collins, all the way down to Colorado Springs, Pueblo. But details are not really highly confident right now. In fact, the models are not really in good agreement about what exactly is going to happen next week. But suffice it to say, there is potential for a decent storm producing pretty good precipitation amounts. There's enough cold air with this storm that a lot of that precipitation could be snow. And we're looking at this storm to be moving through Monday. And if it slows down a little bit across southeastern Colorado, it could linger through Tuesday into early Wednesday. Generally, the ingredients here in the foothills of Colorado on the Front Range for a good snowfall or a significant precipitation event in general is you need a slow moving storm, one that slowly tracks to our south. And as you know, area low pressure, the winds circulate counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere. So if the low is tracking to our south, then the winds come in from the east, and that gives us upslope flow off the plains into the foothills up the Front Range Mountains. Those storms tend to favor Denver, Boulder, Golden, Black Hawk, Central City, and of course Nederland. But then the devil's in the details, as is often said. The storm right now is only entering the Pacific Northwest. It's Friday night, and we're talking about something that maybe start to affect us on Monday. So a lot can change in the next 60 hours or so. I'm going to go to the National Weather Service's page here and take a look at their big map, their hazard map. And you can see that there's quite an active weather pattern, mainly over the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of what we call highlights, advisories, watches, warnings issued. Well, I'm going to take a look at the radar. And the national view, look at this slug of precipitation up here in the Pacific Northwest. In fact, let me go into the high resolution version. You can get a closer look at what's going on up there right now. And my internet connection is a little bit slow tonight. I guess a lot of people stayed home on a Friday night. And any day now. But anyway, this storm system is pushing into the Pacific Northwest right now. And it'll slowly be pushing southeastward into the Four Corners region. And then the upper low is expected to track across southern Colorado and out into the plains, the central plains, early next week. The big question mark is the speed of the storm, and the track too, but the speed is really important. Some of the computer models are having the storm track fairly quickly to our south and exit out of our area by early Tuesday. It doesn't really give it a lot of time to tap into the Gulf of Mexico moisture, which is really important. Got to get that moisture from the Gulf of Mexico back up into Colorado. And it doesn't really result in a very prolonged period of precipitation. And this is not working out very well, is it? Let's just go back here and take a look at. Sorry, it's hard to see. Maybe if I zoom in a little bit here. Uh, yeah, try this. There we go. Aha. That's better than nothing, I guess. Scroll down, and there you go. A lot of rain and precipitation and snow right now in the Cascades. Notice that in eastern Washington, there's not much happening, and that's classic downsloping. The Cascade Mountains are here. You have the prevailing flow, as you can see on the radar, coming in from the west. It gets lifted up and over the mountains. As it gets lifted, enhances precipitation on the windward side of the divide, the Cascades. And then as the air sinks on the leeward side, or the eastern side of the Cascades, it dries out and they don't get as much precipitation. It's a marked line of delineation there where you can see the precipitation comes over the Cascades, it dries out into eastern Washington State. And if you were to look at the climatology, the general climate areas, I should say, of Washington, it's much more arid in eastern Washington just for that reason. And you have rainforests in the western part of the Washington State for this very reason. So lots of question marks. Otherwise, pretty quiet weather across the rest of the nation right now, including us right here. There's Denver, I-25, I-70, I-76, up into Wyoming, I-81. Not much going on right now. You see some echoes out here on radar in this plains. Those are just artifacts. And at night, the radar beam sometimes gets refracted back into the ground, so you get these false echoes. It's really not precipitation per se. Currently, right now in Nederland, it's actually fairly warm. Warmer it's been in a few days. 33 degrees, almost 34 degrees here at our house. Winds are from the southwest, 6 miles per hour. It was a really beautiful day today. I had a chance to telework today and sit up in my office upstairs, and occasionally I look out to the north up towards Longs Peak and Meeker. And our high temperature yesterday, I guess it's past midnight now, so we're going to take a look at the high temperature yesterday. Balmy 46 degrees. Our low was 28. And our average temperature 37 degrees. And the winds were fairly light during the day. We did have one gust up to 26 miles per hour. And the winds were generally from the southwest, as I would expect. Taking a look at prettier weather maps than what we're usually I show you the models, but the models are really all over the place with this upcoming storm next week. So I'm not going to focus too much on that storm right now. We'll take a better look at it Saturday night and on Sunday especially, see how things solidify. But again, what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing is that we're expecting this storm system up here, the upper level low associated with, to do a track something like this and then eject out. It's a good track, and the big question is whether or not that storm will stall out over southeastern Colorado for a couple days. And slow-moving storms produce significant precipitation events. Whether you're talking thunderstorms in the summer, where you, for example, the Big Thompson Canyon flood, we had a thunderstorm that stalled in the Big Thompson Canyon, and it sat there, I think 1976, it sat there for several hours, many hours, and produced well over 12 inches of rain. So stationary storms, thunderstorms, synoptic scale systems like we're looking at here, produce significant precipitation amounts. Fast-moving storms just don't have really a big chance to produce much precipitation because it doesn't last that long because the storm is here and then it's gone. So that's the big question mark. There's not much model consistency from run to run right now, but we'll see. Denver certainly can get big snowstorms, and they certainly have had many storms over 20 inches in the 130, 140 years of records that they have. And the foothills here can definitely get some big snows. And it is an El Nino year, so there's plenty of moisture to work with. Most importantly, the Gulf of Mexico is open for business. And you're like, well, Brian, what do you mean by that? Well, in the winter, a lot of times, as we get into the cold season, the cool season, you can get these cold air masses that just charge down to the east of the Rockies, like that. And they basically, as the cold air, it can reach the Gulf of Mexico. They can get freezing rain down in Texas. But the basic effect of that is to cut off the moisture supply from the Gulf of Mexico back up into Colorado. Right? And at that point, the Gulf of Mexico, any storms coming across the southwest can't tap the Gulf of Mexico moisture quite as easily. What we do have going for us, though, is there's no cold air in the middle part of the country right now. And in fact, there's a big high sitting over the East Coast. And what that means is, of course, the airflow around a high pressure system in the northern hemisphere is clockwise. So these are basically how the winds are flowing. And these winds are flowing like this along these isobars right off the warm Gulf of Mexico. And the Gulf of Mexico is still pretty warm. Not as warm as it would be, say, late summer, but it's still pretty warm. Plenty of moisture to boot. And any storm system coming through here, including the one we're watching next week, if it does indeed swing through here, it can tap into that moisture. And if it's moving slow enough, it has more time to tap into this moisture and curl that moisture back into Denver, northeastern Colorado, the foothills. So slow moving storm systems are good. They produce significant precipitation events. I'm not saying that heavy rain events are necessarily good because they can produce flooding, but if you're a snow lover and you love a big snowstorm, that's how it generally happens. So that's something to keep an eye on. What we're looking at right now is the weather map for tomorrow morning, Saturday morning. Not much to talk about here in Colorado, at least over the weekend. Go to midday Saturday. And by the way, Colorado's right here, this box. A little bit of a trough moving across us, but it'll be dry. This is Saturday evening. Sunday morning. Now by Sunday morning, things start to get a little bit more interesting. You can see that that storm system is really impacting the West Coast by Sunday morning. I mean, look at the heavy rain through all the way down almost to LA and all the way back up to Seattle, up to Vancouver. Pretty widespread storm system. It in itself has quite a bit of moisture. A lot of times as these storm systems cross into the southwest and head over to Colorado, they're coming across several big mountain ranges. You have the Sierra Nevada, you have the Cascades, and when it gets over that, it loses some of that moisture. And then you have the Wasatch here in Salt Lake City, and it gets over that, and it loses a little bit more moisture. And that's Pacific moisture. And then finally, there's several mountain ranges that the storm, the precipitation, the moisture has to get over by the time in order to get to Denver and the Front Range and the foothills and here in Nederland. It gets a little bit drier. That's why it's so important that you have this Gulf of Mexico moisture tap. If you don't have that, storm just doesn't have a lot of moisture. It doesn't matter how strong it is. You're just not going to get that big dump. But we do know that the Gulf of Mexico is open right now, so there's plenty of moisture and energy related to that moisture for the storm to tap off of if it decides to track across the Four Corners region. And again, still 60 to 72 hours out, a lot can happen by then. I try not to get too excited about these things until, I like to tease my wife about 2 weeks after it happens. But in reality, once you get into the 24 to 30 hour period before the storm, you're starting to get a pretty good idea of what is going to happen, at least synoptically, even if some of the finer details of where the heaviest precipitation is going to occur, Estes Park, north of I-70 and the Front Range, south of I-70, those details may still need to be figured out. Anyhow, by Sunday evening, it was pretty widespread precipitation across the western U.S. there. This cold front here is really important. That's the leading edge of that cooler air. It's not a continental polar air mass. So there's different types of air masses. Air, when it sits over a certain area, tends to take on characteristics from that area. All right, so what I mean by that is if you're getting air off the Pacific Ocean, it can be cold, but it tends to be moderated a little bit by the waters of the Pacific Ocean, and it tends to pick up moisture from the Pacific Ocean. That's what we call a maritime air mass. And it can be maritime polar, it can be maritime tropical. Air masses that come down, they tend to funnel to the east of the Rocky Mountains. They tend to form up towards the North Pole or Alaska or even up in Siberia, and then they funnel across the U.S. over the continent. They can be very cold. In fact, some of the coldest air masses that affect the United States tend to dive to the east of the Rockies. and Denver tends to be on the west side of those cold air masses. Places like Chicago, they can really get the full brunt of these air masses unmodified. And Omaha too, Nebraska and Iowa, Des Moines. Unmodified in that they don't cross any water areas, and if there's any snowpack, that helps keep those air masses pretty cold. There's a joke in the plains, or saying, perhaps I should say, that the only thing between us and the North Pole is a barbed wire fence, and even that's blown over. And that's very true, because if you think about the geography of the U.S. and Canada, there's no topography. There's no mountains really, or high areas or high lands between, say, North Dakota, Fargo, North Dakota, and the North Pole. It's pretty wide open. The mountains, the Rockies, go up through Colorado, Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, up through Alberta, all the way up into Alaska. So cold air masses can easily slip down into the central U.S. And we get the side effect of it here in eastern Colorado. So anyway, a lot to watch in the forecast for early next week, especially starting on Monday. But in the short term, the weekend is going to be beautiful. Let's take a look at the National Weather Service forecast tonight and see what they're saying. Give me a second. Go back to their map. I guess I can do this even an easier way. I'll just type in Nederland, Colorado. And there we are. Not Nederland, Texas, Nederland, Colorado. And ta-da. Yeah, there it is. So here in Nederland, looking at highs in the upper 40s. Very similar to today, actually, with lows in the mid-20s. And again, Sunday, the same thing. Go down to the plains, tack on, another 15, 20 degrees to that, and you're looking at temperatures that are going to be in the mid-60s. So it's going to be another weekend of biking, some hiking, running around Chautauqua and the open space in Boulder. We actually have some snow on the ground here now in Nederland from the storm earlier this week. If you get into the woods, it's still about 5 or 6 inches deep. A lot of our snow on our property is blown into a couple big drifts in our driveway, which I've had to blast through. And then we get into Monday, and there's the chances of snow. Snow likely on Monday night. And then really the big question mark is how long does it last? And it looks like Tuesday night, Wednesday, at least a chance of snow. But nobody really knows if the storm is going to be a fast mover or a slow mover. But suffice it to say, I think we will get a period of snow Monday afternoon through Monday night. And I'll be updating this webcast by Sunday anyway, to talk a little bit more about the evolution of this upcoming storm system. But until then, enjoy your weekend. And we got 2 days left, Saturday and Sunday, before you have to go back to work. And there's something to be said for that. And this is Brian with Indian Peaks Weather, signing off until we talk again.